Ray, so great to be here with you again.
Likewise.
Your first time at the Global Summit. In person. In person. Okay. Anyway, the SU Global. Anyway.
I'll take your word.
All about definition. So it's great to have you here. It's so exciting to kind of see what SU has turned into over these 9 years since you and Peter
kind of. Yeah, that is gratifying. As Peter and I recounted, it started with a casual dinner conversation. But that's actually how all my projects start, with some little inspiration or noticing something I've read or some conversation. And I tend to be pretty loyal to my ideas. So.
Much appreciated. So I'd love to maybe talk a little bit, kind of building off that, like what is a typical day for you and how are you coming up with all these ideas?
Well, there's no typical day. I mean, I do have a day job. And as I said, working on these models of intelligence to particularly understand human language. And I think Turing had the right insight that if you could really master human language, you have to master all of human intelligence. So I think the Turing test is actually a valid test of human-level intelligence. And I have a team of 35 people, and it is quite exciting because when Larry Page was trying to sell me on working at Google, he said we have very unique resources, but the most interesting one is the level of talent. But I do, in my spare time, and particularly when I'm on airplanes, I do some writing. I'm finishing up a novel called Danielle, Chronicles of a Superheroine, about a young girl who brings benefit to the world through her intelligence. She's quite precocious. She brings democracy to China at age 14 and becomes its first democratically elected president at 15. She becomes president of the United States at 19 after it's passed a special one-person amendment for her. So she does these kinds of things. But the basic message is you can be a Danielle. So there's a companion book, How You Can Be a Danielle and Help Cure Cancer, or help eradicate female genital mutilation, which is one of her themes.
Is this targeted towards teens or a much broader audience? Or?
Well, anyone from 8 to 108.
Okay,
so
nice.
Kind of
very narrow,
tried to
well targeted.
Boys and girls. But part of the message is you can be a Danielle and help change the world at a young age. So, I mean, these high-tech companies that are worth trillions of dollars today were started by college kids. We see high school kids doing remarkable things now, and the tools are becoming much more accessible, as Peter relayed earlier. And there's no reason not to do that in junior high school. I'm mentoring one junior high school girl who's done some pretty remarkable things in robotics. She's sending a balloon into the stratosphere to view the eclipse from an unencumbered location. So everybody can change the world, and I think that's actually the right idea for education. That's another theme of Singularity University, is to learn by doing. And this school that my great-grandmother started, aside from providing higher education for girls, which was a very controversial notion in 1868, was also devoted to learn by doing. There's another companion book to that, which is a 298-entry glossary to the novel, because it was noted that Danielle touches lots of different topics, and it would be really useful to have some background about what all these things mean, from string theory to Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, very cool.
And then I'm also writing The Singularity is Nearer, so I work on writing projects.
You're staying busy.
In my spare time.
Can I ask you, as Peter mentioned, you have a remarkable track record in predicting the future. Can you take us through kind of your process, how you decide what you want to focus on, and how you go about trying to think about what the world may look like down the road?
Well, as I just relayed briefly, I started this actually in 1981 to try to time my technology projects, because timing is critical. for everything, from inventing to investing to romance. You got to be in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
And I started with the common wisdom, you can't predict the future, but thought as an engineer, if I gathered enough data, I could make some educated guesses. And I made this surprising discovery that there's actually one aspect of the future that's very predictable, which is the price, performance, and capacity of information technology follows a very predictable path. And as you've heard, it's exponential, not linear. Our intuition is linear. The reality, not of everything, not of every technology, but of every information technology is exponential, and there's a very profound difference. So I had, for example, the price performance of computing, calculations per second per constant dollar from the 1890 census, American census up through 1980. It's a perfectly smooth exponential on a logarithmic graph. So I projected it out to 2050. We're now 36 years later, and it's exactly where it should be. It's just amazing. I mean, you'd think with the vagaries of human history that it might be approximately correct. These predictions are amazingly precise. So that's the heart of my prediction process. Peter mentioned that 86% of my predictions were accurate. He's referring to 147 predictions I made about the year 2009 in the book Age of Spiritual Machines, which I wrote in the late 1990s. So the ones that had to do with measuring certain aspects of information technology, like the number of bits we move around wirelessly in the world, those were right on the mark. One that was wrong is we'd have self-driving cars. So it was directionally correct, but it wasn't precisely correct because it involves regulatory issues and market acceptance, and those things are not as predictable. But it is right now information technology that's driving the world forward. People say, okay, well, it's true of these sort of interesting digital products, but as Christine Lagarde, head of the International Monetary Fund, said to me on stage a few months ago at their annual meeting, Ray, you can't eat information technology, you can't wear it, you can't live in it, and we can't power our devices with it. And I said, well, all that's going to change. In the 2020s, we'll print out clothing on 3D printers at pennies per pound. There'll be an open source market of cool designs you can download. We'll print out modules you can snap together a building. There was a demonstration of that recently in Asia, but that'll be a mainstream construction approach. In the 2020s, we'll grow food in AI-controlled vertical agriculture facilities, high quality, ultimately at very low cost. There's a 50% deflation rate associated with information technology. So these fantastic gains are coming to the kinds of products that we don't associate with information technology.
So thinking a little, or kind of riffing off that a little bit, and thinking about what the world may look like with those type of deflationary pressures, what it might mean in terms of pressures on governments. How do you see that, the role of technology? How does the world react to that? How do governments, or governments obsolete? Like, what does governance look like?
Well, things don't go away instantly. I mean, I've written about the life cycle of technologies and institutions, and you reach a era of obsolescence, but they still stick around. There are still mechanical typewriters, for example. Governments are already less influential, despite what you might see in the news. I mean, what's really exciting is what's going on with innovators and entrepreneurs such as we have in this audience, and that's actually not reported on that much. Information goes around national boundaries. There can be some little issue with the pension funds in Spain, and the whole world economic system feels it. So we're in one interdependent world where we all benefit from each other's ideas, and there's a natural acceleration that's built in. I think it's the kind of issues that we deal with here at Singularity University, these exponential information technologies which are going to determine the future. And you say, well, maybe government decisions are going to interfere with that. Well, World War I didn't interfere with it. World War II, the Cold War, the Great Depression, the recent recession in 2008, none of that had any impact on this exponential progression.
On humans, it did, right, obviously, but continued to move things forward in a positive direction as you're...
Well, I think the most profound influence is the kinds of things we can do with technology. Not only the hardware, but the software and the intelligence of technology is improving, and it's part of who we are. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion now as if it's us versus the AIs, as if the AIs is some alien invasion from Mars. But technology is part of the human species. In fact, if you ask what is unique about humans, well, people say that there's a human hubris, because but science has thrown us off that pedestal. We used to think that the whole universe went around the Earth, and that humans were unique. And then Darwin said, no, you're actually cousins with your dog, my millionth cousin, but
right.
We're all part of the same biological substrate. But there is something that's unique about humans. We are the first species to evolve a neocortex that was big enough to create technology and the supposable appendage to allow us to actually create tools that then created new tools. And no other species has done that. So these technologies are part of who we are. They extend our reach. So I could reach that fruit at that higher branch, or we can build this building. I mean, who here could build this building with their bare hands? And we have now tools that allow this kid in Africa to access all of human knowledge with her $50 smartphone. And these technologies are going to go inside our bodies, but I think that's an artificial distinction because we don't go very far without them. Who here could do their work without these brain extenders?
Right. So you obviously work with one of the most leading edge technology companies in the world. Are there, and you get to interact with a lot of similar companies, are there technologies or trends that you're seeing that these companies still aren't quite getting, taking as seriously as they should? Any emerging technologies or other kind of threats or issues?
Well, not really, because there's experimentation with every kind of creative idea. We just saw 3 examples on this stage. But the sort of Silicon Valley spirit of trying lots of things, many of which won't work, is really spread around the world. I mean, I travel around the world and people say, oh, well, our neighborhood is the Silicon Valley of Paris, and our little village is the Silicon Valley of Israel. And that spirit of entrepreneurship, innovation, that failure is just experience, that is spreading around the world. Big companies and little companies all practice that. So it's hard to see that any stones are not being turned over.
Okay, thank you. So I'd love, lots been written about kind of what you do from a health perspective, how you're aiming to kind of live as long as you possibly can. If you wouldn't mind sharing, I'd be really interested to understand kind of what you're doing now and what kind of regimen and maybe how that's changed, if it has changed over the last kind of 5 years.
Yeah, well, I've written 3 health books. They're really wake-up calls for my baby boomer contemporaries. We don't have the knowledge in our hands at this moment to live indefinitely and overcome all disease and things that cut our lives short. However, we do have the knowledge for most of us, including my baby boomer contemporaries, most of whom are oblivious to this perspective, but increasingly they're not. We have the knowledge to get to a point in time where we will have that knowledge. So the subtitle to my book, Fantastic Voyage, is Live Long Enough to Live Forever.
Right.
Another way to put that is to reach longevity escape velocity, which is where we're adding more time than is going by, not just to infant life expectancy, but to your remaining life expectancy.
And when do you think, when is that point
so
at this point?
in my view, that's within 10 or 12 years, which
Okay.
is considered on the optimistic side.
That's amazing.
Robert Gray would say probably 20 years, but I think it's 10 or 12. I think, so baby boomers are kind of on the edge. For my children's generation, for most of you in this audience, wear your seatbelts till we get the self-driving cars going. So my health books talk about, the last 2 are with my co-author, Terry Grossman, MD. We talk about 3 bridges to radical life extension. Bridge 1 is what you can do now. That's a moving frontier. It's increasingly infiltrated with Bridge 2, which is biotech. Bridge 3 is in nanotechnology, the quintessential application of which is medical nanorobots that will go inside your body and keep you healthy by extending your immune system. I used to call that the killer app of nanotechnology, but that was not a good name for a health technology. Most of those books are about Bridge 1, what you can do right now. My whole program is laid out in Fantastic Voyage, which was 2005. As I look, I actually the other day compared what I was doing then to now. It's very similar. I mean, there's some new things that have come along and some new insights. There are more bioavailable forms of a lot of these things, like I don't have to take 12 capsules of coenzyme Q10. You can now take 2 of ubiquinol. And so there's ways to improve it. So I've been able to cut down the number of pills that I've taken. But so far, so good.
It seems like it. Amazing. You're rocking. All right. Well, with that, I want to conclude our questions and love to move and take some questions from the audience. So if we've got mic runners and, oh, there we go. Our first question in front. If you'll keep your hand up, we'll have the mic runner come to you. Yes, sir.
Ray, Mark Donahue from Abundance 360, and really honored to be here with you, and also Barbara Marks Hubbard's here with me, the elder futurist at 88 years old. We had a question about the future of education and how you see that, particularly for a 15-year-old today, because there's part of us that feels like a liberal education is the safest bet to help create a, let's say, a sturdier mind for exponentials. But how do you see education today for that 15-year-old? What would you advise them to do?
Well, to get engaged, I mean, learn by doing. As I go around the world, the model of education in many places hasn't changed, though it's starting to. But feeding facts into kids' minds or adults is kind of obsolete because we carry them around on our belts. And we need to teach kids and adults how to turn all this knowledge, all these resources into meaningful change in the world. So that's the philosophy of Singularity University. You've heard about our team projects. Whether the projects succeed or fail, it's great when they succeed, and many of them will and are succeeding, but even if a project fails, you'll succeed at learning something. And if I think about what I've managed to learn in my career, it's been from having a passion for some goal in a project, and along the way you learn something. And there's versions of that at every age, including elementary school. My grandson is entering an elementary school now that practices that philosophy of learn by doing. So I think that's the future. I think the role of teachers is to be mentors, people who have experienced solving problems before. That doesn't mean they have all the answers, but a big part of education, which is valid, is socialization, so we learn how to get along with each other. I do think it's important to be familiar with history and literature, because that provides many of the life lessons to guide our work.
Great, thank you. Another question?
Ray, it's really a privilege to be in your audience. With all the exponential technologies, with artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, and CRISPR technologies, what is your prediction for the evolution of the human race?
Well, I think we are getting more intelligent through our technology. That's growing exponentially. I mean, and we get used to these things amazingly quickly. It was only a few years ago that social networks didn't work or didn't exist. And we had devices that looked like our smartphones, but they didn't really do anything. This idea that you can access knowledge instantly and access other people is very recent. And it's making us smarter. And we're getting more intimate with the technology. When I went to MIT, because at the time MIT was so advanced it actually had a computer, but I had to take my bicycle across campus to get there. Now they're very close to us. They're going to make their way inside our bodies and brains. So a lot of the discussion we hear about employment and about promise versus peril treats AI as if it's an alien species. In fact, we talk about this other species of AI is going to supersede us, but it's really part of who we are. And we are integrating with it ever more intimately and are literally going to put them in our bodies and brains and connect to the cloud. We are connected to the cloud. I mean, I have to use a device that's outside my body today, but that's fairly temporary. So we're going to increase our intelligence. The most significant thing, I think, will be we'll create synthetic neocortex in the cloud. We have pretty good models of how the neocortex works today. These will be refined with further progress of brain reverse engineering. And so just the way even though this smartphone is already billions of times more powerful per dollar than the computer I used as an undergraduate, it makes itself yet again 1,000,000 times more powerful by connecting to millions of computers in the cloud. We can't do that from our brains yet. We do it indirectly through these devices. That's why we have them. We'll do it directly from our brains, and not just to do things like search and translation and so on directly from our brains, but to actually connect to more neocortex. So I mentioned how 2 million years ago we got this additional neocortex in the frontal cortex. We put it at the top of the hierarchy, and that made us smarter. That was the enabling factor for us to invent language and music and humor and so forth. We're going to do it again. And again, we'll put that additional neocortex, which is synthetic neocortex in the cloud, at the top of the neocortical hierarchy. So we will become funnier, we'll become more musical. That's what I see the future of the human
Finally.
species.
All right. Do we have a mic back there already?
Yeah, right here.
Great.
Ray, I'm going to ask you a question about the blockchain as it applies to artificial intelligence, but first I want to just lay out a few exponential facts. So in 2008, when Bitcoin was invented, it was estimated that all of Google could muster about 100 petaflops. And then by 2013, Bitcoin was at about 64,000 petaflops. By 2015, Bitcoin was more powerful than Google by 524 times. And today, Bitcoin is at about 84 million petaflops. So the question is, how do you see the blockchain in general as it applies to artificial intelligence?
Well, I mean, you're talking about the increase in computation required to mine bitcoins, which is not really AI. That has to do with the exponential growth of computation. It's an interesting model, but I think when you talk about currencies, it's very much a psychological and social issue that people need to have confidence in a currency. They don't yet have that level of confidence in Bitcoin, just because it's been so volatile and for all the... But I do agree that there's no reason why currency should be identified with nation states, and nation states are becoming more porous anyway. Most things happen across national boundaries today. So I do think there'll be new currencies emerging. I would not bet that currencies like the dollar and other national currencies would necessarily be dominant some decades from now. Blockchain's an interesting concept because you keep a record of all transactions. I think people have concerns whether it's hackable, because and I don't think we've proven that Bitcoin is completely safe from that. So we'll see, but I think there'll be competition. There's already competition emerging.
Great. Thank you. Next question.
Yes. There are people in the world that are very smart, and there's people in the world that are not so smart. In fact, half of all people in the world are below average. The physical brain of these people are pretty much all the same, so the difference has to be in the software, the way people think. And I think that most people think wrong. They just don't know how to think, how to use their potential, and since it's essentially software, is there a way that somebody here could come up with a method to upgrade the human software so that everybody is smarter, especially people on the low end, to realize the potential of their minds?
Well, I think we've been doing that. We are, all of us, enormously smarter than we were because of the integration we have already with thinking technology. Nobody here could do their work, as I mentioned, or get their education without these brain extenders we have. And so we've raised the whole level of intelligence worldwide, and that's going to accelerate. I've talked about some specific scenarios where we'll integrate rather literally with technology and connect to the cloud, but we're already connected to the cloud, and that has given us enormous leverage. And I think we'll become more different than we are today. I mean, right now, you say there's differences in human intelligence. Not as much as you might think. We all have 300 million neocortical modules. Some of us organize it better than others for specific tasks. But as we expand our neocortical modules with virtual ones, that extension won't be a one-shot deal like the one 2 million years ago. We got additional neocortex, but our skulls couldn't keep expanding or birth would have become impossible. This next one, the cloud, is pure information technology. It's doubling in power every year as we speak. That's going to continue, so that won't be a one-shot deal. And I think it'll give us actually the opportunity to be more different from each other than we are now, and we can deeply pursue specific interests. But even great geniuses like Einstein really did not have the mental capacity to do more than one thing brilliantly. He was interested in the violin, but he was no Jascha Heifetz, and Heifetz had an interest in physics, but he was no Einstein. We'll have the ability to actually pursue multiple interests and integrate them. As we know, the solution to grand problems is very often at the intersection of multiple fields, but it's very hard for people to have expertise in multiple fields, but I think ultimately we'll be able to do that with these brain extenders.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello. Hi. My name is Robert Sepulveda. My question is, what's your thoughts or theories behind removing the creator's bias so that there is no difference between the creator and the creation?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Like the creator's bias, trying to remove that from AI. Like whatever we have as biases transfers into our creations. What are your thoughts and theories about removing that from what we create in AI, or the creations in AI that we create?
So something completely neutral that is not impacted at all by the programmers, essentially. You know, as you're creating AI, his point is that your natural biases are impacting the direction of that AI. So how could you create something
bias, okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned, one of the mottos of the field is life begins at a billion examples, and whereas many of us have ideas how to work around that and make artificial intelligence more like natural intelligence, we're nonetheless learning a lot from humans and from human data, for example, human literature, and humans are biased, and so the machines are picking that up as well. There's a lot of work being done on recognizing bias in artificial intelligence and removing it. The same way we try to teach humans to be less biased and to recognize unconscious bias and so on. I think we have actually an opportunity in AI to see what it's doing and understand its methods, and therefore expose the bias that it contains. It's harder actually to see that in humans because we don't have the same access to what's going on inside a human's brain other than by their behavior. With AI, we can actually examine what's going on. I think we'll have a better opportunity to remove these kinds of negative influences.
All right. I think this is going to be our last question, Sabna.
Oh. Wow, pressure's on. Hi, Ray. Hi, Will. Question, and it's a big, just open question, is how might we actually design for rapid climate change given the emerging technologies?
Well, I've written a lot about solar energy. In fact, Larry Page and I were asked by the National Academy of Engineering to study emerging energy technologies, renewable ones. And so we looked at them all. Page was particularly interested in geothermal, because you could go a mile or two down this way. There's a tremendous amount of heat, thousands of times more than is needed to provide all the energy that humans need. But I convinced him we should instead focus on solar, because at that time there was a 25-year track record for solar and very little track record for geothermal. And as we looked at it, we found that there's exponential growth in the utilization of solar energy. The number of watts being produced by solar each year has been doubling every 2 years, at that time for 25 years. So at that time, it was like 0.25%, somewhere between 1.25% of the world's energy. So the attitude was, okay, it's a nice thing to do, but it's a fringe player. That's not going to solve the problem. Ignoring the exponential growth, just as the exponential growth of the genome project was ignored. Halfway through the project, 1% of the genome had been collected, and people said, I told you this wasn't going to work. But then 7 years later, 1% is only 7 doublings from 100%, and 7 years later it was finished. Same thing was true of the internet. So 0.25%, that's only 8 or 9 doublings from 100%. Now it's between 2 and 4%. If you add the other renewables, which have a similar exponential growth, like wind, where 4 to 6%, that's only a handful of doublings at 2 years each. So I presented this to the Prime Minister of Israel, who was actually in my class at the Sloan School in the 1970s, and he said, Ray, do we have enough sunlight to do this with? And I said, yes, we have 10,000 times more than we need. Once we double, it was at that time 7 more times, because it was 1%. We'll be using 1 part in 10,000 of the sunlight that falls on the Earth. And this will be subject to the 50% deflation rate of the law of accelerating returns. It will ultimately be very inexpensive. We're not far away. In fact, when we came out with this finding maybe 6 years ago, it was considered very controversial and very unlikely, and nobody considered renewables as being anything more than a small part of the solution. Today, there's a very high degree of confidence because we're getting to that point where it's already having an impact, and it's only a couple more doublings. It'll be a really major factor. The Deutsche Bank reported that the cost of solar energy is less than fossil fuels in some major parts of the world, and that those parts of the world are expanding as the costs keep coming down. So we're not far away. It's like 20 years at the most, even if you assume the big expansion in our use of energy. It's probably like 15 or less. We'll be able to meet all of our energy needs through renewables. And it's not just the motivation for this is not, or the driving factor is not just going to be concerned about the environment, as important as that is, but it's going to be cheaper. It's going to be more economic. So that's where we're headed. I think there's lots of reasons to go away from fossil fuels, and we will have that opportunity over the next decade and a half.
It's a very nice and positive way to end. So, Ray, I want to thank you very much for your time, Thanks. For your contributions to SU and your contributions to the world. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.